Captain Sisson, you have something over 3,500 different proposals that have been through the Alternative Technology Assessment Program, 77 which have been forwarded to the Incident Command. Is that Admiral Allen? Is that?
No, Senator. That is directed to the federal on-scene commander, who at the time, until recently, was Admiral Watson. It is now Admiral Zumkoft.
Okay. So, and do they have a process there for reviewing those?
Right now, those ideas are forwarded to the Critical Resources Unit, who arranges them with the other operational needs and requirements of the spill response.
So have any of those 77 proposals been given final approval and are in current use?
There are two right now that are being used. The U.S. Navy's blimp is one, and it's in a test and evaluation phase, but it is being used in the Gulf. The other is a sorbent boom made by Abtech called Smart Sponge. That's been approved for use both by the IATAP reviewers and the BP reviewers, and it's waiting for an opportunity to deploy. There are several others that are being tested right now.
And where are they being tested?
They'll be tested down on the beaches in Alabama, Florida, and Louisiana.
This boom, is that what you're referring to, or do you mean other technologies?
Other technologies, there's a gravely rapid two-wheel tractor. It's a self-propelled beach cleaner that's smaller, more mobile than the current beach cleaner that's being used. It was authorized through a request for funds yesterday, and we're seeking to buy that and put it to work on the beaches, as it can work closer to the water than the current sand cleaner.
So everything that's been submitted through the Coast Guard, 77 proposals have been submitted on, 2 have actually, or 1 is actually in use, the other one's approved but not in use, and a third one you've just taken action in the last 24 hours. Is that right? The tractor, I'm saying. You're saying the Navy blimp and the boom, the Navy blimp is in service, limited. The boom, you're saying you're going to be testing. You've made a decision to use that technology. Mm-hmm. And the third one, you've started the acquisition process. Is that right?
Yes, Senator. We've also been approved the automatic information system transmit capability. That's an AIS transmitter that'll be put on vessels of opportunity for greater command and control and message receiving and transmittal from those vessels. It's been approved also, but it's still undergoing its initial purchase and deployment. We haven't tested it yet.
So out of those proposals, you can say 4 are, out of 77 proposals, 4 have made it through the process and the Coast Guard is deciding to use them.
Yes, Senator, and also I'd like to add that we did test the supertanker A Whale, so that would be considered a 5th.
And decided not to use it? Is that what you're?
Yes, Senator. The A Whale, although it's a compelling engineering feat, is not suitable to this particular type of spill, and that was the finding of our test team.
And I know the Coast Guard has access to the ideas that BP has submitted, but are you going to be going through that process? Are you going to be reviewing those submissions at some point?
We review the BP database on a daily basis to make sure that there are no duplications, or if there are duplications, what the actions are between BP and the IATAP. But at this time, we are not going through each and every BP submission and analyzing on its own merits. We're strictly going through the BAA process for submissions.
Well, if you have about 3,500 submissions and they have over 100,000, how do you know that the process is working, that some of the things aren't falling through the cracks going through the BP process? I mean, I get the point of looking for duplication, but isn't the point you might be missing somebody's getting stuck in a process of viability on their technology? Because I think it's probably safe to say the BP process is not working as well in the context of if you just look at the sheer volume, I doubt that they've been able to process that much information.
Yes, Senator. We set up this process because of complaints received from the public about the BP database's difficulty in getting feedback. And we also felt that the government should have a standalone capability in this regard. Access to the BP database is not the same as reviewing each and every one, yes, Senator, but we're not currently staffed to get that. It is possible if we put on enough effort, but we don't have the staff for that right now.
Well, but again, I think it draws the point that there is this much public interest and potential for technology, and yet we're here at this point, we don't even have the capabilities of reviewing it. Is that correct?
Well, Senator, we have the opportunity to look at that, and many of the inputs to the process from BP are more, I'd say, vituperative than they are helpful. There are many submissions that aren't exactly submissions. It's difficult to get through that database. And I think that was one of the reasons why we went to a BAA submission, so that we could have an actual proposal with a technical approach and a rough order of magnitude cost associated with it. It's easier for us to handle that.
And so you think you're getting the best of the ideas out of that BP database?
Ma'am, I don't know that I have the best ideas from the BP database.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hilton, isn't the issue that we have a lack of protocols or standards in place to evaluate technology? And as in your testimony, you mentioned the fact that we really have not done the level of research to say what is best technology of today. And so consequently, here we are with this crisis in place, and now we're trying to do catch-up for basically 20 years of lack of focus on this technology.
Yes, I agree that we, as a nation, have not invested in the R&D that we need, and NOAA's tried to move the ball forward with limited support in the sense of we have some base funding that we've put towards R&D. We had a very strong partnership with the University of New Hampshire, and you'll hear about that from the second panel, I'm sure. But some of the work that was done there actually has been directly relevant to this spill, including things like deep water oil and gas and how that behaves and how quickly those plumes surface and how they behave. So there definitely is a need to do that. It's just the challenge is that we go from having a trickle to a fire hose of interest, and how do we maintain an R&D effort in between those spills so that we can develop the tools we need with the time it takes to properly test and vet these technologies.
Well, shouldn't it be more scientific than that? I mean, I think, we see now, this committee has had oversight hearings over the number of large vessels, the growth in large vessels outside of oil tankers carrying large amounts of fuel. And so that has posed the question to us, don't we need to have better regulations because of the large amount of oil that these ships are carrying? So we've had that discussion. Shouldn't the discussion been, we are now doing more and more deep sea exploration, and that raises the risk of challenge to the kind of spill or catastrophe that would happen, and you would have thought that that kind of permitting process would have put you on pace to do the kind of research and development on what kinds of dangers might exist there and what kind of technologies would be needed.
Yes, and we're looking at.
So it's not really a guess. I mean, we're not sitting here going to guess about what's the shape of the next catastrophe. It's more, what are the practices that we are doing, and what kind of safeguards do we need to have against those practices? Because obviously boomers and skimmers at this point in time are totally inadequate to deal with the catastrophe.
And we are continuing to explore in more and more remote locations, and we're continuing to propose navigation in places that are more and more remote, potentially with the opening up of the Arctic for more navigation. So those are obviously very much a concern for my agency. We have put forward some of those concerns. You mentioned them in your opening statement, I believe, about some of the comments that NOAA's made in the past about, are we prepared? And so I think those are on the record already, that we share those concerns.
Well, I'm sure my colleague probably disagrees with me, but it's one of the reasons why I don't support opening up more of the Arctic, because if this catastrophe would have happened in the Arctic, we don't have any of the resources there. We wouldn't have had any ability to get the level of resources that we've been able to amass in the Gulf up to that particular area. But my question is, the level of research that NOAA has been involved with so far has shown some promise in evaluating what is the crisis at hand today, which is the response to large volumes of oil moving about in the ocean. Is that correct? There's some basic technology that we could have, if we put our foot on the accelerator, been at a better place right now to understand where these plumes would be going, the types of information we could have achieved from them, and better helped our response plan. Is that correct?
Yes, and NOAA's focus in this regard has been, improving things like our three-dimensional modeling, so we understand how oil behaves in the water column, not just from subsurface releases, but when you have a surface release and that oil disperses into the water column, where does that oil go relative to the surface? We have
Which is very different technology and
Yeah.
focus than saying, let's look at single-hull tankers, or let's look at, vessels that are now, because they're carrying so much cargo, become larger carriers of fuel.
And another area yes, I agree that, NOAA's role is much less on the prevention and design of safer vessels or platforms and more on improving understanding of how oil behaves and moves, and what we can do to do a better job of cleaning up shorelines, how we can make better decisions about trade-offs of things like dispersants and burning. The other area that we've done a lot of work on recently has been on information technology. Everyone wants the information right away, and we've suffered for not being able to get information out as rapidly as possible. And we have developed some prototype information systems that are up and running for this spill, where all members of the public can go and see what the latest trajectory is, where the contaminated shorelines are, where the fishery closures are. So we're working on that information technology as well, so that the information that we do collect and learn, we can share more rapidly.
Thank you. I want to go first to you, Dr. Starr, because you talked about these sea gliders and the fact that some of them were deployed. I thought the issue is that they could be much more technological, sophisticated in the information that they could gather, and we could be deploying many more of them. Is that correct?
That's correct. As is usual in a crisis situation, people pick up the phone and say, what have you got available? The Navy was charged with putting a couple of their sea gliders into the Gulf right away. They had some ship problems, so they didn't get them out there right away. But there's two issues. One is gliders can only go to 1,000 meters. Currently available gliders can only go to 1,000 meters. This wellhead is at about 1,800 meters, so we cannot actually look at the bottom end of this plume, which we believe from shipboard data to be down around 1,300 meters. There is in development right now a deep glider. Professor Charlie Erickson at the University of Washington is actually going out this week or next week to the Puerto Rico Trench to test that. That glider will be capable to 6,000 meters. It will cover almost anywhere well deeper than you can put an oil well, basically. The other issue is instrumentation. What we have instrumentation on the gliders right now are measuring proxies for oil, oxygen utilization, so microbes break down oil and they use oxygen in the water column in that process, and the measurement of something called colored dissolved organic matter in a fluorescence capacity. That's not oil, but it acts, oil fluoresces somewhat like CDOM, so from our CDOM fluorescence measurements, we can guess that what we're looking at is oil, but we don't know. There are actual oil sensors for polynucleic aromatic hydrocarbons, but they're all too big and too power hungry to actually put on a glider. So more development in that respect would help in terms of getting gliders that could be used to observe oil plumes underwater.
And let's just envision that for a second, that kind of technology and research, again, somebody said, let's make that investment. Somebody was making a decision that, given the level of deep sea drilling that we were doing, that kind of information might be valuable, and that we actually were at that stage of having sea gliders that were capable of measuring the hydrocarbons. What would our response plan look like today then? What would we have been able to take advantage of?
I think that probably one of the most important issues is to know where that plume is, and it's being pushed around by currents that are different than the surface currents, and the oil in that plume will affect different things because it's not coming to the surface, it's not being weathered by the sun or the air, and it is being absorbed by animals, deep shrimp, et cetera, that we don't really know how it's going to move up the food chain, but there's a plume of toxic oil and dispersant. We assume the dispersant is still with it in some respect. But we don't really know how big it is or where it is, and this plume is likely to hang out in that environment for much, much longer than the surface oil. So I don't know that the response plan could have been to get more gliders into service more quickly and to have a better idea of where the edges of this plume were, although there was some debate about whether the plume contained oil at all up until probably the end of May, when I think it was pretty well proven with the shipboard data that, in fact, this was an oil plume.
And Dr. Kenner, too, can't we, in coming up with standards and protocol, look at what kind of activities are most, that are basically are putting forth the most risk to us, and then make sure that the R&D is going there? I appreciate your comments about vessel and human safety, because I know that on these large cargo container ships, we have seen a lot of confusion, or let's just say not good communication among various commands on the ship, and then consequently incidents occurring. So that's a very important issue. But can't we look at the risks for oil spill, or as Dr. Starr is saying, oil vents, and say that, you know, these are our big risks and this is where R&D should be applied?
Yes, I think we can do that, Senator. And if you look at some of the topics that have been addressed in the last couple of years, for example, dispersants, there have been a number of workshops, the first of which happened in 2005, looking at a whole array of R&D needs for dispersants. And many of those issues are still the ones that we are facing today in this particular spill. Of that, about $40 million of R&D that was identified that needed to be conducted. There was a dispersants working group formed of the different funding entities. They decided, we have these resources, this is what we can fund and prioritize. But a total of only $8.4 million was available to do that research. So a whole range of questions, all of which would be very vital to know today, have not been answered. So I think by getting together practitioners, as Dr. Pegau said, and scientists, we can get the questions addressed that need to be addressed. It's just getting them into the R&D pipeline and then into implementation.
Thank you.